G'day, welcome back and Happy New Year. Today I'm starting a new series where I'm going to look at the frequency and occurrence of different chess openings through time. There's quite a few blogs on the internet which analyze this, and I just thought I'd give my own shot at it because I'm quite interested in the way that the openings played have changed through time, both at the top level and at the club level. So I'll probably do quite a few videos on this topic. And we're just going to start off today. We'll end up just basically showing a sort of my analysis process and doing the way that the first move has changed through time. Hence the chart there I've got on the thumbnail, which basically just tells you the two red ones, E4 and D4, King's Pawn opening, Queen Pawn opening, most common through time. And then you've got C4, Knight of 3. You could be a Zucator, Reti, English, and then the bird, Hungarian apparently, and the Nimzo Larsen attack. Very infrequent occurrences at the database level, but their popularity also varies through time, which is kind of what we're going to be looking at. And we'll have by the end of this video, we'll just have at least one animated chart showing how that changes through time. So that's another thing I want to do. I want to get on to moving using these animated charts, which I see a lot of people do on the internet, and they're quite fun. Always wanted to know how to do them. Okay, so let's just first of all just go through a little bit of the history here. Now, what I've done is I've actually chosen 3 books, kind of chosen at random, to kind of highlight the way at the macro level the openings chosen by people have changed. Now, what I find is that you can often find very old books scanned on the internet. I think there was a couple on Arves and one of these is on Web Archive. So the first book we're looking at here is, let's get to the title page, The Modern Chess Instructor by Wilhelm Steinitz. It's a pretty old book. You can see there, 1889. And what I wanted to look at, this is quite amazing. You can still read these books. This one was digitized by Microsoft, University of California. Right, so look at what we got here. Roy Lopez, obviously E4. Roy Lopez, 3 and 4 knights games, fine. Scotch Gambit, 2 knights defense. Petrov's defense. Philidor's defense. Now, I'm not saying that's all the games which are there, but you can see what he's focused on. This is Steinitz, and we're just after the Romantic era, obviously, your Andersons and so on, and Morphy's, Evans Gambits, which is still here, King Gambits and so on, but it's still all King's Pawn, all King Pawn. That's quite interesting when you look at that. Let's look at the next book in my series. Now, this is Logical Chess. I can't find my copy. Of course, I've read this many times as a youngster, book we all grew up with, and somebody scanned this. This was on the Web Archive, so now I've got it. That's great. And then I love this. You go to the very back page, and he's got index of openings. Collet, D4, English, French defense, Guico Piano, King's Gambit, Nimzo, Queen's Gambit, Queen's Indian, Roy, Scandinavian, Sicilian, Stonewall, attack. Now, that's a pretty clear change from the Steinitz book. I find it really interesting because obviously now it's a lot of Queen's Gambit. You think of all those matches between like Capablanca and Alekhine, where it was Queen's Gambits over and over again. So you can see where that's coming from. And the classical kind of Indian defenses, apart from the Nimzo Indian, haven't really come to the fore yet. So that sort of gives you another sort of snapshot. This was, just bear with me, I think it was 1957. So that's sort of, just after the World Wars. Russians have started doing all their analysis. Soviets, I should say. And then the third one, we've got a couple of pages to look at here, is Garry Kasparov, my great predecessors, the 5th one, which is basically the period of Karpov and Korchnoi. And just look at the difference here. We've got Nimzo's, got King's Indians, got Grunfeld's, French defense, Alekhine, Caracan, Catalan, Dutch, English, a completely different set of openings. In fact, moved quite away from standard openings. Let's have a look. Queen's Gambit accepted, declined on the second page. Roy Lopez, a few of those. Pannoni's, Slavs, Sicilian defense. That's probably much more closer to our modern day perspective of what openings are like. So I thought that's just that's a sort of a very sort of quick tour of the way the books have reflected the games which are being played at that time and the openings which people are looking at during those periods in time. Okay. So I just sort of made notes there of what we're going to be looking at today as we go through it. This is obviously it's a statistical exercise. Just sort of go through what you can do here. First of all, you got to collect the game data and create a PGN. Now, I think I'm using the Lumbris database here, but you could use CASA. I mean, obviously have access to chess.com, chess, these things, you can actually do a much bigger analysis. But what I've done is use Lumbrast, and I think I've used the over the board database, because what you start to realize is that there's a big difference in terms of the way openings are played in different forums, right? Because if you think of stronger players, probably play more that set we've just seen in my great predecessors. Club players, probably more Italians and light gambit games, and then obviously it's a question if it's a classical time control, blitz time control. People tend to play much more sharp lines in blitz to try and surprise their opponents. Now, online versus over the board, another big difference, and also where, because I was thinking like maybe if you're doing games from Russia or perhaps China, you might have a lot more Petrovs, for instance. So there might be some specialties there. So just this sort of thing to think about is that although I'm doing a whole bunch of games, actually the realities might be different on the ground for different subsets of that. And so that's the game data. So create a PGN and use that. And there's the other piece of information, we're going to use ECO data. I'll just bring that to the fore here. Be bigger, you can see it. So here is a file of all ECO. You can obviously go and look at Wikipedia or a code ECO goes. Now, what this is in a format that I can use in Python. First of all, the letter, I think A is irregular sort of flank opening things. B is semi-open, so that'll be your Sicilians and so on, but not the French. And then C is King's Pawn game, but then including the French. Now, I'm trying to think about how that happens, but actually, if you look at the history, the French defense was played really early on and was quite a frequent visitor to the chessboard, so perhaps that's why they put in that category. D, Queen's Pawn, and then E, most of the Indian, right, everything. And then it gives you the name of the opening. This is the whole thing. I'm only using named openings, and then the move sequence. So Amar opening, first move is knight h3, and then there's a continuation, all that sort of stuff, right? So, and then I use Python just to play through the moves and get a fen. I'll explain that detail a bit more. And then from the fen, you can find all the games which that opening has been played in. Now, I was very amused when I looked at this. Barnes opening, the Hammerschlag. Now, I don't know if Nakamura plays this one. Hammerschlag is hammer blow. Okay, sounds really great. German. And then it's basically a bong cloud, except you've played f3 and then you play king f2. So that is most amusing. Sort of variants. We're not going to hear about that again because obviously I don't know how many times it's been played, but basically irrelevant for the purposes of my analysis because we're talking, 5-10 million games. It's got a Spike Lee game, but don't know if it's got anything to do with Spike Lee. Anyway, cool, good. So we use that sort of going through the data, and we'll just quickly have a look. If you're in a GUI, you can see some of this already, right? So I've just highlighted sort of the moves there. If you're starting position now, you can see the book here, which you can go through and like you go e4 and I've got the game data, so e4 is king's pawn and then maybe you go e5. Now it's the open game, showing open game down there, knight f3, knight c6, and then what shall we play now? Bishop b5, Spanish Lopez. That's sort of the information is there in the GUI if you want to do it, and I'm just capturing that in a very systematic way. Now, I might just sort of highlight a few things here as we've got the GUI up. Obviously, the first move, you don't get much distinguishing. It's a king pawn game, queen pawn game, English game, Zukertort, all those sorts of things, right? And that's sort of, you think of the one ply classification, which we're doing today, is very, very simple, very straightforward, right? Let's go to two move classification. So now what you're talking about, it could be symmetrical king pawn, it's called open game. Ply 2, you've got a big classification on the king pawn games. It'll be Sicilian, Caracan, Perk, French, all those sorts of things. So you actually get a much more description of the character of the game. For queen's pawn game, not so much, because queen pawn game, you might not know which Indian defense it is. It might be d4, knight f6. You're still not too sure if it's going to be a Grunfeld King's Indian or even a Nimzo Indian or whatever. So it's maybe need a few more plies. And then, as I say, we're just going down to this line. To know if it's the Berlin or not, you'll have to actually go to 6 plies. Black's reply, and now it's Spanish Berlin defense. We'll go way back to the start, and we'll try another line. We'll do a Sicilian line, e4, c5. Which Sicilian? Sicilian knight f3, fine. Let's do d6, Sicilian knight f3, d6. Not being particularly descriptive. Let's do d4. It's actually Sicilian open with d6 at this stage. Bear with me, I'll explain why we're doing this. Sicilian knight off, we'll actually need 10 ply, which is my point here, right? So as we go further in this analysis, if we want to see the popularity of the different flavors of the Sicilian, we're going to have to go at least 10 ply. I guess the choice is you go, that's the knight off, but if we go g6 and variation, well, there's the dragon, knight c6. I guess we call that the classical. Anyway, so that just gives you a sense of flavor, what we're doing. Okay, so that's the data we're working with. So I'm just showing you. Now, what we're going to be doing here, it's just tools we've used before. I can use Python Chess, going to use Scoutfish, and then this pandas alive later on when we're actually coming up with the video. So first of all, we use Python chess. Go through these one line at a time, get the name, get the move sequence, play out the move sequence. I do it at different levels. I do level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So play out to that number of moves, create the fen, and then now I search that fen in the database, and then I've got how many games. And basically, I just create a data of information like that. And if you're doing 2 levels, any 2-level sequences here, like these ones, the Alessi Gambit, G4, F5, the double Grob, G4, G5. So 2-level 1, those openings will show up. 3-level, you'll suddenly get the Polish Gambit. I mean, these are horrible openings at the top. Completely irrelevant, but that gives you a sense. And the idea why one of the reasons I'm using the fen is that this helps with the transposition problem, particularly if you think Zucator, Reti, English often may end up being in a standard kind of Queen's Pawn game. So I end up with these data files. Let's have a look at one of them. Sorry about that. Here we go. There's all the games at one play here. We get about 200,000 moves each game, but earlier on you've only got 200,000 moves each year. Earlier on you've only got a couple hundred moves each year. And in my data, so then you got the Amar opening. Here's how many Amar openings there are, how many Anderson opening, and so on. So that sort of should be reasonably clear, sort of the process here. Obviously, maybe the raw data is a bit too spiky, so then I've taken a 5-year moving average and then basically plotted it. And actually, we can actually load that up into LibreOffice just to show you what it looks like. And here it is. Here are the openings. Highlight Queen's Pawn game, King's Pawn game. You can see that these are the ones with more frequent occurrences. Third opening actually has a few. So that's the data I've got. And so what can we do with this? We can do some different charts, which is basically the rest of this video is all about doing some charts. So let's do that. A line chart, I'll show you the frequency, is probably the best starting point we've got. And here we go. Can you see that? This shows from 1850, King's Pawn game, E4, exactly what you expect, 80, 90, nearly 100% through all of the most of the 1900s. Other openings which played a bit of Queen's Pawn game, a bit of English, a bit of Zucator, a bit of Bird, okay, a few openings there. And then this transformation here, which I was talking about, the period after Steinitz, Lasker, Capablanca, Alekhine, all through that era, where Queen's Pawn game, basically just Queen's Gambit type structures became more popular, even more popular than the King's Pawn game. And so that was a really big change. I need to do more videos on is obviously what were the main explanations, what type of Queen's Pawn games, were the Queen Gambit declines, were they Slavs, whatever, all that sort of stuff, right? And also at the same time, this is the hyper-modern pickup, where you've got this Zucator opening had been played earlier, but sort of really picked up. Now it's called maybe the Reti, and in combination with the English, even White taking the hyper-modern approach to their opening. So you see that picked up, and that's stayed pretty steady for the rest of the 100 years after where chess has been played. Whereas the King Pawn versus Queen Pawn has been oscillating. This pickup here, post World War II, I guess, around World War II is. You'd be looking at a lot of the work, mainly by, I guess, the Soviets on the Sicilians, the Garokans, modern defense, all these other openings, which if we split it out in a later video, we'll be able to separate from King's Pawn game, because this is back here, it's probably all open game, and now it's probably semi-open, and that's pushed King Pawn game up above Queen's Pawn game. So that's the flavor of it. Now, the next thing I wanted to do now is just try and animate that. Okay, so just quickly explain what's going on here. Use pandas alive, load that up in your Python environment, and then you give it a data set. It'll generate the chart, first data point, store it, generate the chart, second data point, store it, and so on. So basically you end up with a whole series of data points, whole series of charts, and then basically it joins them all together into MP4 or movie files. So basically that's what these animation functions do. You can do matplotlib using the function animate. This pandas alive does it for me very easily. Mind you, there are some parameters I haven't worked out how to use properly yet. Anyway, so let's have a look at what it looks like when we run it that way. So first of all, you generate the chart, and that's what this is doing here. So this is doing the first level chart. You can see it's got this is the data it's going in, and it's an opening Grob, blah, 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 Queen's Pawn, King's Pawn. Transpose the data, because actually pandas alive needs the data that way around. And now it's just going to go away. It'll take a couple of minutes to run it. When that's finished, I'll come back and we'll have a look at the chart in VLC. Okay, so it's going to look like this. And I've slowed the speed down so I can narrate a little bit. Basically, it's just going to be showing bars which mirror what we saw earlier on the line chart. So as we say, we got king pawns, 80% of the openings, and that tends to be all double king pawn games. You got a few queen's pawn games, a bit of bird opening, a bit of English opening, a bit of Zucatot opening, but they're all very minor. Now we're getting onto the 1900s, and queen pawn games, probably mainly symmetrical ones, take a bit of a boost. This is Lasker Capablanca era, and then I think basically you see the Capablanca Alekhine era. Queen pawn games really shoot through the roof, and at this stage, probably a lot of symmetrical. We can check or confirm that later. And then now post World War II with the Soviets, you see the King's Pawn game takeover again. That's got a lot to do with presumably the Sicilians and so on, and the Queen Pawn game and the Hyper Moderns. So you got more Zucatots, more English openings, and you also had a lot more of the Indians within the Queen Pawn game. And that phase fairly stable, and just sort of little iterations through that. In fact, the other reason I want to think about this, I see a lot of people do shorts like that. So I'm going to try and turn that into a short of some version. Obviously, I probably have to fiddle with the font size and all that sort of stuff. However, so just go back to my summary. Let's close that. Basically, that's what I set out to do in the first video in this series. Just look at how the frequency of chess openings has evolved through time. And as we look deeper into it, we'll try and find some of the factors which explain different changes. I mean, obviously Berlin is one interesting one, all to do with Kramnik in 2000. Earlier in that, Kasparov, games like the Scotch became popular after he played it. And you could basically go back to different World Chess Championship matches and find often a opening which comes to popularity because of what the World Chess Championship showed. Great. Okay. Hope you enjoyed that. And thank you very much for watching.